All right. Welcome, everyone, to the January 20th remote meeting of the Scituate Board of Appeals. Participation is available via Zoom tonight. Our meeting ID is, I guess I should say that the instructions to access the meeting via Zoom are available on the Board of Appeals website. Participation is also available by phone, and we are streaming on Facebook Live. We are going to get started with our first application brought by Joseph P. and Mary Antoinette Tatine Joyce of 39 Ocean Avenue in Scituate, requesting a special permit or finding in accordance with MGL 48 Section 6 and Section 810.2A of the bylaw, and any other relief that the Board of Appeals may grant to allow the raising and reconstruction of a pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling at 39 Ocean Avenue. If you can raise your hand if you are here for our first application, and we will unmute you.
Anthony, can you hear me? This is Paul Marabito.
Hey, Paul, how are you? And do we have Bob, Janine, or Brianna? Do we have Bob available?
I don't see him yet.
Okay. I'm sure he will come in. I'm going to unmute Joseph Joyce, who is here. Hi there, Mr. Joyce, and I'm also going to invite you to start your video. We'll see if that works. All right, we have Mr. Joyce, and we have Paul.
Bob is joining.
And Bob is joining. Look at that, it's coming together. Back to remote, always fun. It's like riding a bike. All right, we'll give Bob one more second.
So Anthony, I'm here.
Hi, Bob.
How are
Welcome
you?
back.
Thanks.
All right, Paul, do you or Mr.
Justin's
Joyce?
here too.
What's that?
I was gonna say Justin, it looks like Justin's here too.
Wonderful. Paul or Mr. Joyce, you want to get us started? Tell us a little bit about your
Thank
project.
The applicant, Barbara Jean, can you share the plan?
Yes.
Thank you.
Can you see it?
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank
Yes,
you.
we can.
Okay, the applicant owns the existing home at 39 Ocean Avenue. It lies on a lot having an area of 13,602 square feet. The existing home, shown in the middle of the lot, currently meets all the required property line setbacks for the building. The only nonconformity is the lot frontage at 75 feet, where 100 feet is required, and the lot width through the house, which is 75 feet as well, and also where 100 feet is required. The applicant is proposing to raise the existing the existing dwelling that's shown in the crosshatched area and replace it with a proposed dwelling, which is labeled with the solid line going around the existing home. The proposed dwelling will meet all of the required setback dimensions for a dwelling. That's the front yard, rear yard, and the two side yards. The reason for the application is to be allowed to raise and reconstruct the existing dwelling and construct a new dwelling in the location shown on the plan. But the new dwelling will have an increase in the gross floor area of 40.8%. There's no changes in the grade of the lot proposed for this. And I think it's straightforward in that the proposed home does meet all the required setback requirements. So with that, I'll end and answer any questions the members may have.
Thank you. Do any of the members of the board have any questions on this application?
I have none.
I have none.
I do not. We should let Justin in though, however.
Yes, I think we actually just heard from him. So I think
I'm
he's
here and I can see I'm in as far as I know.
Oh, okay,
You're in.
all right. Got it. There's no video. That's fine.
Susan,
I'm working
anything
on
to
the
add?
video now.
I don't hear Susan, but
Oh, yeah,
no.
sorry, I didn't have any
oh,
questions.
that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. Bob,
Yeah.
any comments or anything to add on this application?
Only the original house was built in 1910, so in order to demolish it, it'll have to go before the historical commission.
That, I've done that, Bob. This is Joe Joyce.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, Bob. We went to the Historic Commission. They approved it to take it down, and they were going to notify you. So you'll
Okay,
be
great.
receiving that. Thank you.
Excellent.
All right. So I'd like to ask if any members of the public have any questions or comments on this application. And the way to, we'd ask that you raise your hand, and it's a virtual hand. You can do that through the more option on the Zoom call, and then there's a button to raise your hand. We'll be able to see it. Please raise your hand if you have any questions or comments on the 39 Ocean Ave application.
It looks like someone's raising their hand, their physical hand.
Aha, I do
The
not.
Len Rubenstein.
Rubenstein.
Mr. Rubenstein. Mr. Rubenstein, we are asking to unmute you. Sorry, I was unable to see the actual hand since the plan is up over my video.
Is everybody good with the plan?
I'm good.
I think we are good with the plan
Yeah.
for a minute. Pretty straightforward one.
Okay, can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, so I think one of a couple questions we have, and this is probably for Bob. Are there any
So, I'm
drainage?
sorry, Mr. Rubenstein, just your address for the record, please.
We're at 41 Ocean Avenue, we're direct neighbors to the
Sure.
Joyces. Are there any drainage, storm or water runoff issues that we have to be concerned with?
That's pretty hard to tell, very honestly, without having the plan in front of me, which I don't. But if there's no change in the grading, and I believe that's what was stated, that there shouldn't be any particular change in runoff. The increase in impermeable area is not great enough, I believe, to trigger a stormwater permit review. Perhaps Paul can speak to that issue.
There was 6.8% Bob, increase.
So that's very little increase, and I really wouldn't anticipate a problem in that regard.
Okay, if there is the problem, what is the ramifications of that?
Well, what would that problem be, in
So
your opinion?
So is the foundation, the new foundation going to be much higher than the existing foundation that's there?
Higher in the sense of up on a hill in the grade itself?
Yeah. Yes.
No, I think it's been represented that it will be at the same elevation or very, very close.
Okay, okay.
So another question we have, and I guess this is something maybe the town could answer to us. Are there restrictions in building times of when building could be done, whether it's Saturday, Sunday, times at night, things like that?
Unfortunately, there are not. There are restrictions for any project that's overseen by either the planning board, for instance, the Toll Brothers development, or the zoning board of appeals, for instance, a 40B project like Herringbrook. Those restrictions are written into conditions of the project. For private constructions, single-family residences, the zoning bylaws don't contain anything like that. Not that they shouldn't, and it's been talked about, but there's nothing in there at the moment.
So is that something like a gentleman's agreement between neighbors?
Certainly.
Yes, yes, very much.
Okay, we can talk to Joe about that.
Okay, so it's hard to tell from the plans, but how tall will the structure be? Will it be taller than it is now? Will it be higher than the?
I don't know, actually. We haven't
So
been presented with
It is,
documents.
Bob, I can take that. It is proposed to increase by about 3 feet. And that increase, based on the proposal, will still comply with the bylaw.
Okay.
Yeah, that's no problem. So that won't create a shadow issues or anything like that.
Okay. The other question I had is when the structure, since was built in 1910, when it's raised, do the town bylaws have any, is there a bylaw for against dust and potential contaminants when the house is raised for neighbors?
Yeah, the health office actually monitors that situation, but it's required prior to demolition to have an asbestos survey
Okay,
by a licensed asbestos abatement firm. If there's any asbestos found, it needs to be abated and properly disposed of. And that documentation's all got to be on file before a building permit can be issued. Similarly, for rodents, you've got to abate for rodents, make sure that the place is clear so that they don't scatter to the neighbors when the demolition happens. And that paperwork's got to be on file prior to the building permit getting issued.
So if there is asbestos or any contaminants, the Board of Health takes care of that before it's raised, or?
Yes, they
Correct,
would
yeah, before
they
it's
would
raised.
certify that it's happened, that the paperwork is in order, report back to our office, and I don't issue the permit until I've got their okay to go ahead.
Okay.
I think that's all.
I think that's all the questions that we have. Are there any variances that after the structure is permitted that will be notified about if after it's permitted, or does that happen during the permitted time?
So I think your question, variance is a funny word with the zoning board. I think what you intend to ask is if the application changes
Yes.
for the home, will you be notified? And Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, if the footprint doesn't change,
Okay.
and if they don't seek to increase the height beyond the 35-foot maximum, you may not be notified. If the footprint changes, that would require them to come back to this board, in which case I think you would be notified. Bob, would you agree with that analysis?
Yes, absolutely. It would honestly take a change dramatic enough to require additional input from this board. And then there'd be another public hearing and abutters would be notified and we'd do it again.
And to be honest, if the footprint shrunk in one area, it also, I don't think they'd be back before this board.
I see.
It would take a significant change.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think our biggest question was for drainage and runoff, and it's just, those are our concerns more than anything else. We've never had issues here. So if the structure were changing enough so that the foundation changed so much, or it was higher, or septic issues, whatever, that, what is our recourse at that point, or do we have one, or?
Yeah. It's hard to say about recourse. They are well under the threshold where they would need a stormwater permit from the
Okay.
town.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. If anyone else has any questions or comments on the 39 Ocean Avenue application, please go ahead and raise your hand. Does not look like we have any other comments.
There's a Kathleen.
Yes,
There's a-
Katie.
Yeah.
Hi, Katie.
Hi,
Just your name and address for the record, please.
Kathleen and Alex Thompson, 31 Ocean Ave. We're down the street. I'm just curious, having never really attended one of these, what about the visual? What's the house gonna look like? Will we get to see designs?
So, no, not as part of this proceeding, and there isn't a design review process. So that would be, you would have to inquire with the applicant.
Okay,
There isn't an approval that the town has over the appearance of the home.
I see. Okay, so the historic, when you say, when it went through the historic group, that there isn't certain bylaws that they have to?
That relates to the demolition of the historic home.
Okay,
And it sounds like in speaking with the applicant, and it would certainly make sense given this home, well, our threshold is at 100 years. Homes from the early 1900s, unless they had some special significance. From what I've seen, it's rare that there would be restrictions placed on their demolition.
okay,
What replaces them, to my understanding, is not part of that review.
okay, okay, great. Okay, we'll contact Joe and Tatine and see if they can show us what they have plans then. That'd be great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's see if we have anyone else on 39 Ocean Avenue. We're getting down to it.
Does not appear to be.
No, all right, with that, we will close the public hearing portion unless any members of the board have anything else to add. Or Bob, I'll go ahead and make a motion that the board approve the special permit application for the proposed raise and reconstruction at 39 Ocean Avenue, as shown on a plan made by Ross Engineering and dated November 16th, 2021. And that the board find that the proposed dwelling doesn't create any new nonconformities, and to the extent it intensifies any existing nonconformities, such intensifications are not substantially more detrimental to the surrounding neighborhood.
I second that.
Thank you, Chris. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Don't we have to do roll call
We
for
have to do a roll call vote on a Zoom.
on a remote meeting? Sorry to
Certainly.
jam stuff up for you.
No. Well, I'll start. Anthony Bucari, aye.
George Sixtus, aye.
Chris Karsha, aye.
Susan Harrison, aye.
Justin Marks, aye.
Well, the ayes have it. Thank you very much, Paul and Mr.
Thank you,
Joyce.
Anthony,
Good luck with your project.
thank you. I
Thank you.
want to let you know that the applicant has engaged attorney Walter Sullivan to write the decision.
Wonderful.
So he'll be filing that with the board shortly.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right. We're going to move on to our second application brought by Brian Roque of 53 Hawley Road in Scituate, requesting a special permit or finding in accordance with MGL 48, Section 6 and Section 810.2 of the bylaw, and any other relief that the Board of Appeals may grant to allow an addition to a pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling at 53 Hawley Road in Scituate. All right, it looks like we have Mr. Roque.
Yes,
Welcome.
thank you.
Plan here. Right, a few pictures. All right, Mr. Rope, would you like to tell us a little bit about your project?
Sure. So it's 53 Holly Road. It's a single level home currently. It's approximately 750 square feet. And I want to put an addition on that adds about another 525 square feet to it. It'll still all be on a single level, just going out rather than up.
Sure. Could you give us those square footages again that you just said?
Yeah, so I think the existing house is approximately 768 square feet.
All right, on your application, you have 1079. So I just want to go to the assessors, and not that either of those numbers are necessarily a problem. It is part of what we look at and what we note in the decision. So I just want to make sure we have it correct.
Yeah, I think the house is approximately 24 by 32, so I think that's where the 768 comes from. The 1079 might have included like a screen porch or a deck or something.
Sure, and is it a single story presently?
Single story house with crawl space underneath, and the addition will also be single story.
Sure. Here, I found the card. Let's see what we have here.
768 on the card.
Yeah, okay, so just a little typo on the application. And we're going to 1,522 square feet, is that about right?
That's about right, yes.
Oh,
Actually, no, going up to about 1,300 square feet when it's all done. Well, if you take the 768 and you add like a 525 or whatever that. So I guess it's whether you're adding the addition to the 1,079 or whether you're adding it to the 768.
Well, I want to add the addition to the 1,079 if the 1,079 is an accurate number, but I'm not sure where that number's coming from.
Okay. I'm not sure. I could check with the engineer to see where that number came from.
Okay. Any square footage questions aside, the plan does appear clear to me. And so it looks like we have what's represented on the plan as 3 rectangular additions. And
Yes.
just a little, so are those going to be, those are single story additions to the existing single story home?
Yes. Yeah. So two of the rooms, the new rooms are being added to the back of the house, and then the kitchen's being pushed out to the side. So that pushing out to the side is the 3rd rectangle you're talking about. So it's a kitchen enlargement and then 2 new rooms on the back of the house.
With a deck in between the 2 new rooms?
Yeah, a ground level deck.
I got you. And that will be entirely within the footprint.
Yes.
All right. And the existing shed is remaining?
No, I'm going to take that shed down. It's unless it falls down by itself before we finish the addition.
All right.
Yeah, that's just like a small 6x8 garden shed, but it's in pretty rough
Seen better
shape.
days, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
All right. Anyone from the board have any questions?
I do not.
No questions.
George,
No.
Susan and Justin?
No.
I do not.
Bob, what do you have for us?
The only thing that comes to me is that the front setback line shown at 15.9 feet, I assume was derived from an average setback of the adjacent homes, using that exception in the zoning bylaws, but I don't see that calculation anywhere on the plan, but that would be my assumption. And as you can see, the addition is farther back than that. So I don't really have a problem. I'm just kind of remarking on that.
Yeah, I think I think if you were to measure from the front of the existing house to the edge of the street, it's more like 25 feet, but I think the first 9 feet of the front yard belongs to the town.
Yeah, that's
Because if you
pretty typical.
Yeah, because you look at the maps, and the map says the street's 40 feet wide, and it's actually only like 22 feet wide as far as the paved portion. So I think that's where the 16 or 15.9 feet comes from.
Well,
That
right.
would be,
The measure is from your property line, which is shown in red here on the plan.
yeah, so just to go through the zoning chart that was submitted with the application quickly, because it does look like we have some things that are worth noting. The front setback appears to be 15.9, where 30 is required. And for the sake of this hearing, I'd like to assume that that is a nonconformity. Just to elaborate on what Bob was saying, if the average setback of the homes between intersecting streets was 15.9, like this home or less, that would be considered conforming.
Okay.
We typically rely on a certification from an engineer, typically written right on the plan when that's the case. I think it's best to assume that that is not the case here until shown otherwise. I think that we would probably need to know that if the front setback line of this home was changing. Since it is not here, I'm not sure that figuring out that one way or another is necessary. The left side setback is right up to that setback line, but in compliance, and that's not changing. The right side setback is going to change, but it is staying within compliance. The lot area notes a required lot area of 6,016. I believe that's incorrect. Bob, are we 10 or 15 in R3?
10.
So that's 10,000 is required, but so the home's pre-existing non-conforming as to that statistic.
Right.
And then lot width is also non-conforming. And I think for the sake of this application, we should assume that the existing square footage is that 768. And with these setbacks, I'm comfortable noting in the application and decision, square footage of up to the 1,522
Okay.
that we have on our chart. With that sort of clarified, I'd ask if we have any members of the public that have any questions or comments on the 53 Holly Road application. You can raise your real or virtual hand. And I do not see anyone. Give them one more second. Well, I think we're good. All right. We'll close that down, and I'll make a motion that the board grant the requested relief for the proposed addition to the home at 53 Holly Road in Scituate, and that the board find that the proposed addition as shown on the plan prepared by James McGrath and dated September 1st, 2021, does not create any new nonconformities, and to the extent it intensifies any existing nonconformities, such intensification is not substantially more detrimental to the surrounding neighborhood. And the board approve said addition, provided that the total square footage of the home does not exceed 1,522 square feet, and that the location of those additions remain entirely within the building envelope, the required setbacks.
I second.
Thank you, George. All those in favor, Anthony Bucari, aye.
George Sixus, aye.
Chris Karsha, aye.
Susan Harrison, aye.
Justin Marks, aye.
Thank you. The ayes have it. And thank you, Mr. Rowe.
Thank you very much.
All right. Janine, who's up?
4 Garfield Street.
Sorry, who's up for to write that decision?
Oh, I don't know. Who would like to do it?
I'll do it.
Okay.
Here we go. Thank you.
Sorry, I misunderstood you.
No, that's quite all right. All right, we're gonna move on to our 4th application brought by Kenton Bongerzone of 17 Gate Circle in Scituate, care of John Dennehy. And they are requesting a special permit or finding in accordance with MGL 48, Section 6 and Sections 810 and 820 of the Scituate zoning bylaw and any other relief that the Board of Appeals may grant to allow existing nonconformities at 5 Williamsburg Lane in Scituate to be extended or changed to a use not substantially more detrimental.
So Anthony, just to be clear, there was a 3rd application. Is that no longer on, or are we skipping it for the moment?
No, to be clear, I read the wrong paragraph.
Okay.
I'm
just trying to keep us on track.
I apologize, Attorney Dennehy. I'm going to go back to 4 Garfield Street because I think
Feel free.
they might prefer not to wait for yours to be completed. I apologize for the mistake there. We're going to go with our 3rd application of 4 Garfield Street Realty Trust at 733 Plain Street in Marshfield, requesting a special permit or finding in accordance with MGL 48, Section 6 and Section 810.2A and 470.6 of the Scituate zoning bylaw and any other relief that the Board of Appeals may grant to allow the raising and reconstruction of a pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling at 4 Garfield Street, increasing the gross floor area by more than 20%. Mr. Morse, welcome.
Good evening. For the
Please go
record,
ahead.
thank you. Yeah, for the record, Gregory Morse, registered professional engineer with Morse Engineering. I'm representing the applicant, Kevin McDonough, the trustee of the 4 Garfield Street Realty Trust. As was just read into the record, this is a raise and reconstruct project located at 4 Garfield Street. We're here per section 810.2A of the bylaw, 470.6 of the bylaw. This property is located in the R3 zoning district over in Hummerock. It's also located in the floodplain and watershed protection overlay district. The existing home was built in 1940. It predates the town's zoning requirements. The existing nonconformities are the lot area. The lot area is 5,620 square feet, where 10,000 square feet is required. The frontage is 75 feet, where 100 is required. The lot width is 75 feet, where 100 is required. And the existing structure is non-compliant with respect to rear yard setback at 12.9 feet, where 20 feet is required. I would add that the existing home at the site is non-compliant with FEMA floodplain requirements. The proposal here is to take down the existing building and construct a new single-family home in its place. It's largely in the same location. However, we are pulling it forward slightly on the lot. Because we're pulling it forward, we're able to bring the rear yard setback into greater conformance. The rear yard would be proposed at 13.4 feet from the lot line, where it exists at 12.9 feet today. The new home would be constructed on pilings in accordance with all FEMA and National Flood Insurance Policy requirements. And the floor areas, the existing home being 1,334 square feet, the proposed home being a 2.5-story home, comes in at 2,890 square feet. It represents an approximately 117% increase in size. With the home being 2,890 square feet, there are several other homes in the Humrock vicinity and neighborhood that are of similar size or even larger. We felt it was keeping in tune with the character of the neighborhood and bettering the situation as we're bringing it into full FEMA compliance. I'd turn it over to you.
Thank you, Greg. I have no questions. I know because it's often a question here. The application has the home remaining in compliance with our height bylaw. That is really all that I have. Do any other members of the board have any questions or comments on 4 Garfield Street?
Justin, no.
I do not.
George does not.
I don't either.
Bob, anything to add on 4 Garfield?
No, nothing here. Good.
All right. Do any members of the public have any questions or comments on 4 Garfield Street in Scituate? You can raise your hand and turn on your video or raise your hand via the Zoom application.
I don't see anyone.
Neither do I.
Kathy's iPad.
Kathy's
There we
iPad
go.
has a hand raised.
Has to unmute. Has to start video. There we go, Kathy. Welcome. What's your name and
Hi.
address for the record, please?
Kathy Vining, 10 Garfield Street, Scituate, Hummerock, Mass. So my only question, in increasing this by 20%, and they said, I'm anticipating that he means by going out towards the river versus his backyard. And I haven't seen any plans for this house, which he's obviously not, doesn't have to show me, but I just want to make sure that it's not going to go encroach on the street per se.
Sure. So and Janine, I think you might be able to bring up the plan. Is that correct?
I don't have that one on a PDF.
That's okay. To clarify then for you, the home is not going to be any closer to any of the property lines than it is today.
Okay.
It is getting slightly further away from the rear property line. It is getting a bit closer, about 5 feet further from the river. And it is, so I'm incorrect. From the eastern property line, it's getting just over a foot closer, but still complies with our setbacks by a healthy margin. The increase in the size of the home is coming from an increase in stories, not from an increase in footprint.
Oh, okay. I just wasn't sure about that. And that was my only concern, that because it's a private road, you know, the road would get smaller at the end. So.
Yes, they will be actually a good deal further from the river, and they will still be 24.5 feet from the private road. So a little bit closer than the existing home, but still within what is required based on the average setback that we mentioned in the last application.
All right. That was my only question.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And thank you. They're wonderful neighbors.
That is good. Love to hear it.
Yeah, and good luck to them. They do a great job. So have a nice night. Thank you.
Thank you. We have anyone else on 4 Garfield Street? I think the only hand I see raised is Kathy's still.
Oh.
That's okay. No problem. All right. With that, I think we will close that down. And one second. I will make a motion that the board grant the relief requested in connection with the raise and reconstruction at 4 Garfield Street, shown on a plan drawn by Morse Engineering and dated December 9th, 2021, and that the board find that the proposed dwelling does not create any new nonconformities, and to the extent it intensifies any existing nonconformities, such intensification is not substantially more detrimental to the surrounding neighborhood.
I will second.
Thank you, George. All those in favor, Anthony Bucari, aye.
George Seksis, aye.
Chris Karsha, aye.
Susan Harrison, aye.
Justin Marks, aye.
All right, third application. Since I tried to skip it, it's probably only fair that I do that one.
Okay. I was gonna offer if you want me to.
Uh,
I don't
sure
mind.
did. Okay, there we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you, Greg. All right, from there, we'll move on to our fourth application brought by Kenton, Bonger Zone of 17 Gates Circle in Scituate, care of John Dennehy Esquire, requesting a special permit or finding in accordance with MGL 48, Section 6, and Sections 810 and 820 of the bylaw, and any other relief that the Board of Appeals may grant to allow the existing nonconformities at 5 Williamsburg Lane in Scituate to be extended or changed to use not substantially more detrimental. Welcome, Attorney Dennehy.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, fellow board members. Yes, my name's John Dennehy. I'm an attorney down here in Greenbush. I represent Kenton Bonger Zone. Also with me is Mr. Morris, who I think he said good evening, good night, but he's still here for this hearing. We are looking for a special permit or finding under really Section 820. I know the application said 810, but I have to say it would not apply because 810 applies with structures, single-family homes already in existence. So we're looking at the non-conforming use aspect of this lot, which happens to be at 5 Williamsburg Lane. Now, I think for the board members, other than Mr. Chair, you probably have seen this application or an application similar in the past dealing with a variance back in 2015. This is not a variance. This is seeking the special permission or special permit under Section 820. For everybody to understand, the plan that was submitted by Mr. Morris shows a lot, 5 Williamsburg Lane, that for all intents and purposes, other than the non-conforming use, is a conforming lot. It meets all the setbacks, meets all the lot width requirements. It meets the actual lot size. So the issue really is this nonconformity, which happens to be a drainage pipe. And the drainage pipe from the plan that was submitted is actually on the rear end, and it goes from left to right, I guess you could say from east to west. And it is a drainage pipe that goes off of Country Way that ultimately ends at a head wall that opens up and then works its way down further into, I guess you could say, the tack factory pond. So Kenton Bonger Zone, who's been a native, who's lived here all his life, grew up, owns the property. And by way of background, what happened was Kenton's father was a contractor who set out a subdivision plan back in 1957. And that was the subdivision, Williamsburg Lane. And accordingly, all the homes up and down Williamsburg Lane were built. And this lot in particular wasn't. In 1971, the town came to, his father's name was R. Mariano Bonger Zone, said, we need to have an easement to go across your land because we have a drainage, I guess you could say a drain that we need to just drain off the site, off the road, Country Way. And so he gave it to them in 1971 for $1. And consequently, they actually moved it. I got an old plan of it, but it went literally diagonally across the property. And at some point in the future, the town decided to upgrade it from a corrugated pipe actually into a cement pipe. And they moved it to the rear of the property, if you will. So it's perpendicular to Country Way. But if you're standing on the corner, because it's on the corner of Country Way and Williamsburg Lane, it's in the rear portion. Now, Williamsburg Lane is a little south on Country Way from the Scituate, or not Scituate, but well, it is Scituate. It's the Masons building on Country Way. So let's fast forward a little bit. In 1980, what happened was Mr. Bongazone, which was Mario, who had it under his corporation, then conveyed it to himself individually, so he owned it individually. And then 1987, the Water Resource Protection District zone was put in place all over the areas to protect our water resources, to safeguard and protect the town's, I guess you could say, water supply. So they didn't want to have landfills, transfer stations, junkyards, filling stations, things of hazardous nature, waste that could pollute our water supply. This lot, along with every other lot around it, heading south on Country Way, is within this zone. And there are other zones throughout the town that have it. Also protects our water supply, which would be our reservoir. It also protects our wells. At that time, okay, this lot could have been built on. It wasn't. In 1994, Mr. Bongazone then made a joint tenancy with his son, Kenton, and Kent is the one who now owns it because in 2000, Mario died, and so now Kent owns the property. So again, this lot has been a part of a subdivision plan since 1957. And I say that because I want to make sure that people understand that Kent has owned this property along with his family. He's not an opportunist. He's not somebody coming into town to say, I want to flip a property and make some money. It's been in the family for all these years. So why is it a nonconformity? It's because of the Water Resource Protection District. If you have the plan in front of you, which I hope you do, okay, if you're looking at it, you will see at the very back of the lot, there is a drainage pipe that goes all the way down and then opens up almost at the end where a head wall is. And I just ask, if you don't have that, I'm happy to share my screen so you can see it. That's very important. And the reason why it's important is because we're dealing with a use. The use is a drainage pipe that should, based upon the Water Resource Protection District with the head wall, is a nonconformity. Should not have been there, but it pre-existed the 1987 Water Resource Protection District zone. So it's a nonconformity, and it's a use that's there that shouldn't be there. The other reason why I mention it is this. If you look at, I think it's 520, which happens to deal with the Water Resource Protection District, 520.4 buffer zones, number 4 in particular, as well as a few of the others, says any surface discharge, it's prohibited. Now, this is the town's easement that they took from Mr. Bongazone, or they gave him $1 for it. So they paid him consideration of $1 to do this. And frankly, they should have complied. But again, considering it's a nonconformity with the drainage, it's a prohibited, shall we say, use, but it predates that. So that's the use that we're talking about that is nonconforming. And so what we're seeking here is to look under 820. And when you look under 820 in particular, it states, your board may find under Chapter 48, Section 6, as well as 820, that if there's a non-conforming use, it can be changed to a specific use, not substantially more different in character or not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood and injurious to the neighborhood. And there are two items particularly itemized. One is, if the pre-existing nonconformity is located in the Water Resource Protection District, such use cannot be changed to a use prohibited by the use regulations under the Water Resource Protection District. Unfortunately, the bylaws as written notate section 510.4. That's an error because 510.4 doesn't deal with the Water Resource Protection District. It deals with design standards and requirements under the residential cluster district. What I think it's really trying to do, and obviously that's something that should be clarified in the future, what they're talking about is under the Water Resource Protection District, there are prohibitions of any type of use, and there's actually a chart for it. And when you go through the chart, it's talking about like certain things, uses that, like I say, transfer station, junkyards, things that could impact your water supply. So that section doesn't apply in this case. And then when you get to number 2, it talks about if you have a pre-existing non-conforming use, located within the Water Resource Protection District. Such use may not be changed to another non-conforming use. Now that's important. And the reason why I say that is because the use that we are asking for is for a single-family residential home. And single-family residential homes are not prohibited within the Water Resource Protection District. It's allowed as of right. And so this section doesn't apply either. So the gist of our suggestion of why this should be able to happen is under the next section, which is pre-existing non-conforming uses may be, says extended. We're not extending the drain pipe, so that's irrelevant, but it says or altered. And that's the key. The use right now is a drainage pipe in the back. It's being altered because we're asking permission under the special permit, or actually a finding that a residential home is being placed there. And this use, which happens to be the nonconformity, we should be able to put the allowable use, which is a single family home. And that's the crux here. That's the issue. Now, as far as the other plans, I'm going to defer and I'll turn it over to Mr. Morris, Greg Morris. They're looking to build a 3-bedroom family home. And he'll go through it, the setbacks and everything. We're putting it as far as we can away from this drainage pipe. And I also think it's important, and I'm happy to show you because I have them all queued up, but we are not within 150 feet of the reservoir. We're thousands of feet away from the reservoir, okay? What we're close to is that DEP determined back in like 2013 on another project just a little south of this corner that a outlet pipe, a drainage pipe, if you will, from the street is a tributary. And as a result of that acknowledgement by DEP, it says there's 150 no disturbance zone. And again, that's the reason why we are in this situation of 150 feet setback. Now, the last thing is this: if there was no disturbance on the property, which Greg will talk about, then I would say virgin land, I'd be like, you're right, that's a problem. If this was a spring at the point where the water sees daylight, where daylight comes, and nothing else, that would be a problem because we don't have a nonconformity. But the simple fact that the town has put a drainage pipe that it had it been put after 1987, you couldn't do it. It would be a prohibition, but it's been sanctioned because it's a nonconformity that pre-exists. And so that's the reason why we're asking this board for either a finding, which it's not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood because everything around the neighborhood, this lot, are homes, single family homes. And if not, then we're asking for a special permit to do it for the same reason. We're not building a 4-bedroom home. We're not building a large home. It's going to be a 3-bedroom home. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Greg Morris. Greg, would you like to explain a little bit more about the other plan that you had also submitted?
Yes, for the record, Gregory Morse, registered engineer, Morse Engineering. Might be easiest if I can do a screen share or if the site plan can be put up, perhaps by Janine, if you have it.
I don't have it that I could share it. I could hold it up. I don't know if that would be helpful.
I do have it. If you could allow me to share, if that's acceptable.
I would love
Or Greg,
that.
can you share it?
Yes, I can share it here. I have it as well.
Is that acceptable, Mr. Chair?
Yes, absolutely, please.
Thank you.
So the host of the meeting just needs to give me the permissions to share it, whoever's the host right now.
Well, that would be me and Brianna. And Brianna, are you able to give him permission to share? I'm not seeing that option, and I've clicked on his name.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing is the message I get on my end.
I think we might have lost Brianna for a moment.
Oh. I mean, short of being able to share it, if you have the plans in front of you, what the
Yeah.
plans would show you.
Which
The
plan,
plans would show-
Greg, are you looking at? Are you looking at the site plan or are you looking at the one with green and yellow?
Sorry, not to interrupt you, but you should be able to share your screen.
Okay, let me. There it is. Yep. Bear with me one sec. I'll
Fantastic.
get it up.
Thank you, Brianna.
Are you able to see this?
Yes,
image?
we are, Greg.
Perfect. Okay. So as depicted on this plan here, Country Way is on the left-hand side of the page. Williamsburg Lane is at the bottom of the screen. The bold black line right here where my cursor represents the property line. This property is in the R2 zoning district, which requires a minimum of 20,000 square feet. This lot exists at 21,461 square feet. The entire lot is upland area. There are no wetlands on this property. It is not located in the floodplain. This lot was created originally by the Williamsburg Lane subdivision, as Attorney Danahy stated. It was laid out on that subdivision plan of 1956. Since that time, this lot has been altered, rather significantly since 1956. It's evident from walking the lot that it was cleared at one point. There are stockpiles of soil in this location on the lot. We performed a soil test pit right here with the Board of Health, and we witnessed fill. We included a copy of a test pit log that had 52 inches, which is over 4 feet of fill placed on this lot. Looking at the contours here, it was evident that this lot was essentially filled in from Williamsburg Lane. Perhaps fill from Williamsburg Lane when it was built was just pushed onto this property to level it off, if you would, in anticipation of a building. Obviously, that building had never happened. There are plans from the town of Scituate dating in 1970 of a drain pipe that Attorney Danahy referenced as well. You'll see here this abandoned drain pipeline. This was a corrugated metal pipe that had been installed at some point from a drain on Country Way, which discharges at the back of the property here. In 1970, the town recorded a new drainage easement, however, and the Bonger zones granted to the town an easement for $1 consideration to install a new drainage pipe. So this one here I've labeled as abandoned, obviously had served its use at that point in time. But I think it's ironic that the new drain pipe that the town installed was not in that location, but you'll see here, the town took a 20-foot wide drainage pipe and installed this new concrete drainage pipe over here with a new head wall, which is a significant structure on the property. And I think this location was chosen so that it would be out of the way of the future development of this lot. Anyways, this property, we did have the DEP come out and walk this. We have walked this with the Conservation Commission as well, again, to confirm that there are no wetlands on this property. But this label right back here, intermittent drain channel, this is the intermittent stream, which is a stream that dries up for significant portions of the year. However, that stream is technically classified as a tributary to the Tack Factory Pond Reservoir. Per the bylaw, section 520.4, there is supposed to be a non-disturbance buffer of 150 feet measured from the edge of this tributary. That 150-foot buffer encompasses the majority of this lot. I've highlighted on this plan here in red that 150-foot setback. So all of this land where the fill has been placed, where the drain pipe has been placed, where the abandoned drain line was, this has all been altered, even though it's inside that 150-foot no disturbance buffer zone. So our proposal here is to construct a new single-family home. That new single-family home is the structure that you see placed here. It would be a 3-bedroom home. It would have an access driveway off of Williamsburg Lane. It would have access to town water. off of Williamsburg Lane. It would be serviced by an on-site septic system at this location here. We had previously applied to the Board of Health for a septic permit on this property. The septic permit was issued for this property. It has since expired. We will be going back to them, but we have no reason to believe that it won't be issued again. The regulations have not changed during that period of time. We were taking all of the roof area of the house and recharging it into dry wells at various points. These would be connected to the roof gutter systems. All of the standard drainage and all of the standard construction you would see here associated with any single family home. And we were implementing a 50-foot no disturbance buffer, which is this proposed 50-foot no disturbance zone, this line, so that we would maintain a 50-foot vegetated buffer between that head wall and the edge of the lawn surface. We proposed markers along that 50-foot buffer zone so that it would clearly be demarcated and would be left in its new natural condition. And turn it back over to you for questions or comments, and Attorney Danahy. I'll leave this up on the screen if you'd like, or I can take it down.
Greg, if you could take it down, actually, I'd like to have our video back for a minute. I think we'll be able to talk through some of the physical characteristics. So, Attorney Danahy, you mentioned that there's previously an application for a variance here, and I understand your explanation of your reasoning for why this is not a variance application. It's based on 820. And there's two things here. That assumes that the use of this site currently is not in conformance with the bylaw. And it assumes that you were changing that use. So I'd like to go, we'll deal with the second one first. To the extent the current drainage easement on the site is a non-conforming use, are you getting rid of that non-conforming use?
No, and I say that because if that were the case, first and foremost, you can't, because the town owns the easement.
That would great.
But the use, the nonconformity on the property is being altered because you're adding a conformity to it. And the only best example I can think of, because I was kind of racking my brain today saying, okay, think of nonconformities. The problem with nonconformities are, I mean, aside from like buildings, old antiques like my office or somebody, that too close to the road and everything, a use, because a lot of our uses have kind of like worked their ways out because of the business zones. But I take Sand Hills, okay? I live in Sand Hills. The Sand Hills General Store is a prime example. It's a non-conforming use because it's been a general store there since the late 1800s. The store continues to exist. But the store originally was just a store, post office, and maybe somebody lived above. After the blizzard of 78, or shortly around there, they ended up taking down the original building, an old 1870s kind of structure, and they built what's existing there today, which are multiple apartments. So you had a non-conforming use, whether it was in the 70s, that they ended up adding a whole bunch of conformities, which are residential apartments. And that's what we're seeking here. We're saying, okay, our non-conformity is the fact that they put a drainage pipe straight off the road into our tributary, into the reservoir, and it's been termed a tributary. And ironically, what's ironic is it really needs to go through a filtration system to ensure that what comes off the roadway doesn't get into the thing. But regardless of that, what we're saying is we're actually asking to alter that because the use is on that property. By altering it under the bylaws of 820, we're saying we're actually putting a conformity on it, which happens to be the single family home. And so I guess you could say the change happens to be the alteration between the nonconformity that's there and what is conforming, which is a single family home.
But if you were adding a conformity, you wouldn't need to be before us.
Correct, because the conformity would be that
Conforming.
it would be conforming, but because of the non-conformity, it's like a building. You know, when you have a building that's not conforming and you're trying to say, like you said in earlier, I think it was on Holly Road, let's just say your setback is non-conforming. They could add a conformity by going back 30 feet within the R3. That's conforming, but they're not. They're actually saying, we kind of want to like maybe even create a jog. It's still a non-conformity. It's still a non-conformity to some degree. In this
Well,
case, whether you want to
let's
turn
get
it
into why
non-conformity,
it's still
use
a
is going to be
non-con-
conforming though. That's the key. The use is residential. Okay,
Well,
as
the
opposed to structure.
use, but the structure will be a new non-conformity.
No, because the non-conformity, it will conform to the zone. It's
520.4.
not about a structure issue. It's about the use.
I think I disagree there. 520.4, the buffer zone, which this property is in. One of the prohibitions in the buffer zone under item 3 is construction or placement of any permanent structure other than those associated with the providing of public water. You're proposing a home, which will be a permanent structure in as much as houses are permanent in Scituate. We get a good amount of wind, but that'll be a permanent structure that is not associated with the providing of public water. And therefore, it will be non-conforming in the buffer zone.
I disagree. I think that the issue is that this use, which is 820, saying it's a non-conforming use, which is a conforming use, which is the residential. And that's
I'm saying one thing, and you're saying you disagree with that because something else is true. What you're saying, that a residential use in this district is allowed, is absolutely true.
So let me tell you that, how about this?
A permanent structure is not allowed.
So the neighbor next door, okay, on Country Way, puts a pool in, which they have. That's a structure. It's been allowed. Somebody comes in and says, I need to put another septic system in, but not in the same area. That's going to be a structure.
Now your
town ends up putting a bike path, sidewalk within it. That's a structure. And that's where the relief.
You're making a different argument now.
You're giving the issue of, you know, allowing people who have structures within their properties to be able to increase. And it's the use issue is what it comes down to.
That's what you had me for a second. You were making an argument that allowing a new home to go in on buffer zone land is no more detrimental than allowing a home to be extensively altered or added to within the buffer zone. I think I may agree with that. I think that the town and this board traditionally has drawn the line between the two. And if you want to make an argument that we should move that line, then that's a conversation we're going to have. But that's not what you were saying initially. You were saying that this is different because there's a non-conforming use on there now. So adding a conforming use isn't a problem. The use is not the problem.
So I'm at my office is at 50 Country Way for people who know where it is. Okay. It's across from Untold Brewery. And I think, Mr. Chairman, you're on the board. Around the corner, there happens to be what was called Smokey's property, who has 2 little homes by Mr. Proctor. I think you were on the board at the time. There happens to be a tributary, which is actually crossing my property here on 50 Country Way. And at some point they put, shall we say, concrete piping along the actual tributary that goes right into Old Oaken Bucket. Okay. And same situation. Mr. Proctor came before this board, said, I actually want to tear down the 2 homes and I'm going to build, I think it's contractor bays and homes. And this board allowed it. Now, that's a tributary. It's well within the 150 feet. This board determined that it was a nonconformity because of the piping. And that's why I raise it, because the
Well,
consistency.
but wait,
here,
I'm sorry.
and they're not
The
being
board,
approved.
we got bordered on incorrect there. It wasn't a nonconformity because of the piping. There were homes on the property. That was improved land. There were
Right.
buildings on that property already.
And you
Are there
changed the
buildings
use
on this
though.
property?
The use has changed though. The use was actually residential, and then you approved a commercial component to it, which is a change of use of which we're saying that are allowed in this district, which is the
Sure.
same
So
thing in this situation. The use is a residential, you're allowed to use it.
Yeah, that was apples and oranges because that wasn't a vacant property with a pipe. That was.
Yeah, but
That was an occupied
approved
property. And I'm gonna
contractor
continue for
bays.
just 1 second, Attorney Dennehy. So let's go to that. Let's go to use for a second. Bob, is a drainage pipe under our code considered a use? Is there anywhere in town that a drainage pipe is specifically allowed or specifically prohibited under our use guidelines?
No,
Yeah, so changing a use just because of a drainage pipe, from a use standpoint, I would contend that this property is not being used under our code. A drainage pipe is not a use under the terms of our code. And George, I've had enough of the floor. Why don't we see what?
Yeah, so I was coming out the same way on this, that this is unused property, and unfortunately, a drainage pipe that has been put there has turned this into a tributary, right? And there's the 150-foot setback. But there seems to be an embedded argument by the applicants here that I don't want to lose sight of, because they've made it, but they haven't made it, I think, explicitly. I don't know if it's a good argument, but they brought up a number of things, right? So if this in fact is a non-disturbance buffer zone, then certain things should never have happened, right? Which includes earth movement, right? Removal of vegetation, which has been done. And then there was no construction. But then the fourth criteria is any surface or subsurface discharge, including but not limited to stormwater runoff. So if it's in fact a buffer zone, none of these things should have occurred at any point in time. And they did. Arguably, the creation of the stormwater runoff is what has caused the tributary, right? And that there's the setback. But if it was a buffer zone, none of this should have been done. And then
You have a timing issue there, right?
Huh?
I think the easement went into place before the stormwater protection district.
Correct.
The water.
Correct. But it may be the case that these other activities occurred, some of these other activities occurred after, if not the first storm drainage pipe went in, between the first and the second, or even after the second. So, and again, I don't want to lose sight of it. I'm not saying it's a great argument, but they've been making it, right, embedded in what they're saying. Greg was very clear on what he believed has occurred on the property. So that's, I just wanted to bring that up and make it, see what people have to say about it.
Bob, you had some information for the board on this. To the rest of the members of the board, please feel free to speak up. I know Bob has something to say, which is why I mentioned his name next.
Well, again, not being an attorney or an authority on how this is viewed, but I was on the planning board when the subdivision called White Ash Farms was presented. That subdivision is just south of this site, borders on the same water course that we're looking at the beginning of on this site, Tan Brook, which does flow into Greenbush Pond. In that case, the planning board heard a lot of arguments, did a lot of research, heard from the Water Resource Committee, heard from DEP, walked the site with DEP, I think more than once, concluded that part of Tanbrook that bordered, in this case, White Ash Farm, but also emanates at the back part of this site at the head wall, was in fact a tributary, as defined by the zoning bylaws, was in fact worthy of that 150-foot buffer zone protection. And that was enforced on the developer of White Ash Farm. So, one thing that occurs to me is, why was it enforced in that case, and seemingly is being requested to not be enforced in this case? That's just kind of a little history lesson that I happen to be participant of, and have firsthand knowledge of. The other thing that occurred to me as I thought about this was that, is that head wall and even the drainage pipe a non-conforming use? Could that, all of this kind of starts to be hinging on definitions. Could that come under 520.4A3, which says construction or placement of any permanent structures other than those associated with the providing of public water?
So
does this facilitate in some small way the providing of public water?
Those are prohibitions. It specifically says under that, the following additional activities are
other than,
prohibited.
John.
So if you're saying number
other-
3 is
says
providing
other
it,
than, John.
well, it's coming off a road, which is number 4.
I'm just reading what the
Surface water. I
zoning
mean,
bylaws
the
says.
town just put down a whole bunch of salt and things. That's going to go right down.
I
into
get what you're saying, and you're right. I'm reading the bylaws, all I'm doing.
I know, but it also goes through filtration systems to be able to ferret that stuff out to prevent it from going directly into our drinking supply. This is just a basically pipe that takes the water from the roadway going straight down into the system.
So John and Bob, we'll come back to the use thing. Greg, I think you may have been raising your hand and had a point on the prior project that Bob drew a comparison to, and I want to give you an opportunity to speak on that.
Yes, absolutely. I am the design engineer that designed the White Ash Farm subdivision, which is the 305 Country Way project that Bob's referring to. That was treated differently because that was a brand new subdivision that was permitted in 2009, 2012. We were creating new lots. They had to comply with zoning at that time. This is a lot that dates back to 1955. So it was treated much differently, being a brand new lot versus this is a pre-existing nonconformity in our presentation tonight.
Yep, I see that.
And we don't see it as a tributary. It absolutely is a tributary.
So back to the use, and I think I have been clear in past hearings that I am a huge fan of the reasoning that our buffer zone bylaw was created. I am a huge critic of the drafting of our buffer zone bylaw, obviously with the benefit of many years of hindsight and having been tasked as one of the folks who is charged with enforcing it. But that said, Attorney Dennehy, let's say we give you that the property is currently non-conforming use. And let's say we give you that what you're proposing is a change to a non-conforming use, even though I'm not sure it's a change. I think it's just a new use that is non-conforming because there isn't going to be any change to the non-conforming use. It's not like when we changed a store from one type of shop to another type of shop. This is a drain over there on that side of the property. Now we're going to add a house. But let's say, fine, under 820, we may grant a special permit allowing this. That's not all the relief you need. You also need relief from 520.4A. And you can't use 820 to not have to worry about 520.4. That is not the way the code works. And I think at the end of the day, we're all in agreement on that. A non-conforming use or a use change that is less detrimental doesn't mean you don't have to comply with 520.4A. And I'm not sure we need to get into what ends up being semantics of 820, because even if we're with you on all of that, you're still proposing a home, which is a permanent structure within the buffer zone, and which will require, the construction of which will require activities which cause earth movement or disturbance. So this application doesn't go forward without relief from 520.4. And that's what I'd like to focus on for the time being, is whether or not you should get that relief. And this is where I have been a critic of our buffer zone, in that it seems as though the code just says, no, you can't do it. We want to protect the water, protect our water source, so you can't build within 150 feet. And it's 150 feet, as you noted in your explanation, of the reservoir and of tributaries, which, let's just say, this is not the most clear tributary out there.
Okay.
This is obviously not a major source of Tack Factory Pond.
So are you, Mr. Chairman, saying that any disturbance within the water protection resource area, water resource protection district, any disturbance of land? So if somebody wants to add on to their house, this supersedes your 820 section, because that's what you're saying here. You're saying that any house, you can't even go to 810, because that doesn't apply, because section 1 says 824A1, any activities that cause any movement. Can't do it. Any vegetation removal, if you're going to cut trees or remove anything, can't do it. So I think the question to this board
without relief from this board. Yeah,
hold
yes,
on.
That is what I'm saying.
If you're saying that, then every home within this district, if they want to do an addition, they want to add anything or cut back or anything, regardless of wetland protection, okay, they can't do it, because you're saying this section 520.4 supersedes 820, your authority.
Bob,
and I think that's important, because that's the difference from our perspective.
I understand your question, and I'd like to answer it. Bob, if an existing home within the 150-foot buffer from a documented tributary came to you, and the home was entirely otherwise conforming, and they sought to add an addition which was within the buffer zone, would you give the building permit if all other things were given, or would you send them to our board?
No, I think I'd have to send them to the board.
And John, I think that answers your question. Now, your next point is going to be, what is the difference between a 5,000 square foot addition that, just because the rest of the home has already been there, and a new home, especially if the new home takes all sorts of environmental and technological precautions to not disturb our water supply? And I think that's a very good point, and that's where I'm trying to lead this conversation. But yes, to answer your first question, yes, 820 serves no purpose to supersede or end around or stop someone from needing relief under 520.4. And
See, I
this
think
board has been consistent on that. However, we have consistently given that relief to lots that already contained homes.
But to your point, Mr. Chairman, if you're giving relief to lots that already have homes and they're disturbing, or they're removing vegetation or constructing permanent other structures, you're giving relief to existing homes that pre-exist. And that's why I say to this board, consistency, I know it's a hobgoblin, but the question then comes to say to all the other board members, including yourself, if you're saying that 520.4 going forward means that there is to be no further disturbance within the whole water resource protection district, then I would say you're right. Then fine, that's what the board's going to do. But if this board, like I said in the past, because I can name a number of them going up Country Way, that there has been disturbance, and Bob, the plant, it hasn't maybe gotten to this board, but certainly has this board, the building department has allowed it. You got to be consistent, because frankly, to the bonga zones who've owned this lot, who came in with a variance and now have come before here and saying, look, we're just trying to build on it, which is not next to the reservoir. It's next to the tributary that was determined to be a tributary, which we've set up front. You got to be fair and consistent about it. And, you know, as I say to, I think Mr. Xerxes, you know, you mentioned about disturbance. I mean, obviously this lot has been disturbed in the past. And so the question is, are you going to say that you're not going to disturb it going forward? You can't, because you can't build a house because of this section. You know, the question is, the board is saying to somebody, and that's the reason why 820 is there for nonconformities. If there's a nonconformity, and no offense, the nonconformity is that they put a structure. A head wall is a structure. I mean, you can look under the building code, and I think, Bob, you could probably agree with me on that. It's a structure by definition of the building code. If it's a definition by the building code, our zoning boards, our zoning bylaws don't define that. So you have to go back to the building code. And it's put in there. It predates the Water Resource Protection District. So it's a structure that's not conforming. Never should have been put in there by the town. But it was.
John, your argument's jumping around a little bit, though. Is the head wall a structure? I totally agree with you. Is the head wall a structure that's a non-conformity under 520.4? Yes, it is. Is the head wall a use? You're going to say it is. I don't think it is. But I don't think we need to have that conversation. I think your argument, and I think it's an argument that I think is rather valid, is what is the difference between this board being comfortable bending 520.4 to disturbance because a home is already on the lot, and this board getting comfortable bending 520.4 when a head wall is already on this lot? And I think that is let's put it this way, that is the argument that you have access to that makes the most sense to me. Calling that a use and this a change of use, to be perfectly honest, doesn't make any sense to me. And then where I go with it is, and this is, I'm sure you'll help me remember, because I'm sure you had it in front of you more recently than I. What is, other than the attempt at you sort of bring in 820, what is the difference between the proposal for the lot in this application and in the application that came before this board as a variance?
Well, they're two different standards. The variance is saying.
I know what the difference for us in approving it would be. What is the difference? If I looked at the plan for the variance application from a few years ago, what would I see that made it clear that that was a variance application and this is a special permit application? What's different?
The difference was the attorney at the time viewed it as being a variance as opposed to a special permit. And
Okay.
I don't know what he thought at the time as far as his approach to it by looking at the bylaws. You know, it's just a different idea of how to approach looking at the bylaws and suggesting, is this a possibility with the discretion of the zoning board of appeals?
So I think that answer makes sense. That's what I wanted to confirm. I wanted to make sure that there wasn't something in the proposed improvements or use that I was missing. And I can't work out the bringing in 820 changes things for me on this application. I can wrap my head around the fact that the board, and you are absolutely right, has been somewhat liberal with allowing additions or modifications to homes within the buffer zone that pre-existed, and has differentiated, when asked by the public, as I'm sure we will be very shortly, that by saying this was already built land, and that we couldn't possibly interpret 520.4 to mean that you could never do anything ever again on those lots. Because in my opinion, and I've said this in past hearings, 520.4 wouldn't last very long if we interpreted it that way. And the argument for approval of this special permit or finding, the best one that I can see is, well, if the board draws that distinction between improved land and not improved land, you're saying that there's a head wall on this property. And this is not virgin land, I think, is the point you made before. And I think there's some validity to that. It doesn't make our job very easy because, to be honest, looking back, we were trying, I think, to keep 520 around by not over-interpreting it in a way that I thought, and I think some other members of the board thought, made it likely for it to be struck down altogether. And now it begs the question, well, what were we looking at besides the fact that a home was there that made us okay with some of our prior approvals? And if we can identify that, then we can get into discussing whether or not this application is in line with those things that we found that made us okay with it or not.
I think you're right, Mr.
And-
Chair. I think
and when-
that's really what you're looking at.
And Tony, when you get to it, right, isn't that, if you go down that line of argument, right, isn't it, if there's an existing structure, and specifically this is an existing home, right, how is the change to the home, how is that going to impact sort of the spirit of the buffer zone, right? If there's a home already there, right, it has a particular impact on, you know, the water resource situation, right? A incremental increase in square footage has a very small incremental impact, if any, right? I think that's the argument, right? That's where we're going with this. So the question then becomes, if we're going down that road, is this building here, right? Because the question is this a buildable lot, right? Can you build on this lot, right? Because it's not at all, right? So is the building of a home as proposed something that is going to be detrimental to the water resource protection district, right? And if that's how we're looking at it, I'm just trying to.
And that's where I've always had trouble interpreting 520.4, in that this board, and this is where I actually like, I don't know, the difference between a special permit and a variance is confusing to me here. Not the difference in standard,
right?
The difference in what to apply,
right?
And that's where we sort of leaned on the fact that, George, we were expanding a home. The existence of a home in the buffer zone was the pre-existing nonconformity, and we were amending that a little bit more, moving something from here to there, and we were allowed to determine, to be honest, in hindsight, probably without as much input from boards and folks that had more background and expertise on its effect on our water supply. But that's where we were weighing whether or not it was substantially more detrimental.
Right.
And what I've said in the past about 520.4 is it it would make a lot more sense to me if, because in my mind, you could build something in an environmentally sensitive area if you take steps
Right.
to prevent those environmental implications. Now, as Mr. Morse can probably say better than anyone else here, often those steps to prevent those implications are logistically complicated or impossible or too expensive that makes the project not work out. But you could figure that out. I have trouble here saying that a home is not buildable within 150 feet of a tributary, and just saying it's not buildable, in my opinion, is an interpretation of this section of the bylaw that makes it defeatable.
Right.
Well, let me ask you, Anthony, you're saying a home. I get that. Okay, I get it. But how do you reconcile any addition or any, because if you're saying that, then you're going back to 810 to say that 810 has the authority to supersede 520.
No,
I mean,
No. John, it's the opposite. He's saying that if, correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, what Tony's trying to say is that if you interpret 520.4, right, as a strict standard, which means no home can ever be built within a buffer zone, right, then 520.4 might be defeatable, right?
Right, I agree with you.
Right, Tony, was that, I'm just trying to get it straight.
No, George, I agree with you.
Okay.
But what about additions? Because I think that's what I'm missing it. Maybe I'm missing.
No, but what he's saying is he's helping you.
Okay,
Right?
so we're having a violent agreement.
If we go so far that says no home, right, we've said we can do additions. If 520.4 is read as you can never build, right, within 150 feet ever, right?
Right.
Build
So-
a new home, then it could be, it's theoretically defeatable.
Right. And
Let me
John's
ask you,
argument is that
how do you get to additions then? How do you reconcile the fact that you can add additions? If 520.4 say you can't do a disturbance, I get it, because it's complete prohibition. The thing would have been changed at the next special town meeting or meeting, whatever.
Right.
But people were doing additions.
Right.
And how do you reconcile that? Because if you do that, you have to go back to 810 to be able to say, well, it's already single family home in existence, pre-exists, so we're going to allow that. And I guess when I read 520 altogether, there's nothing to suggest that if somebody has an existing home they want to add on to, which frankly people want to do, that we're going to allow that, but we're not going to allow new homes. I guess that's how I don't understand.
John, let's look at that for a second, because you raised an interesting point. One of the ways that you reconcile it is we were giving, when we had a home that existed, that pre-existed the water protection district and existed and was affected by 520.4, and we're doing in addition, those are 810.2 special permits. 810.2 special permits apply to single and two family non-conforming structures. A home in the 150-foot buffer that is put forth by 520.4 is a non-conforming single or two family structure. And we were giving special permits to additions to those structures. This, while a structure, doesn't fall under 810.2. So to even be allowed,
I see where you're coming from, Anthony. I get it.
And so I got.
I don't understand. Hey Siri.
Oh, Siri doesn't understand. Siri, you and the rest of us are sort of in the same boat there. The issue I have, John, is I'm between a rock and a hard place here. I have your client that I think has the opportunity to shoot down whatever decision we make here tonight. And I think we have the town that has the opportunity to shoot down whatever decision we make here tonight. and this is where it gets complicated, and it's part of why I so despise 520.4. And I despise it maybe more than anyone that also thinks that protection of our water in this town is as important as anything else that we do. But I can't make a motion or second a motion or vote for a motion for an 810.2 special permit here. I don't see another area under our code to give you a special permit to build this. And that's where I have trouble. I don't think 820 gives me the right to give you a special permit to build this. And I don't think 810.2, or I guess it would be 810.3, right? The Board of Appeals may allow the repair, alteration, reconstruction, extension, or structural change of a non-conforming structure other than a single or two-family dwelling, if the extension or change will not be substantially more detrimental. So you're asking us to give you a special permit that creates a single family or a two-family dwelling. 820 doesn't let us do that. And 810.3 doesn't let us do that.
No, I agree. 810 does not apply here because it's not already a two-family structure. If it's two-family or a structure, if single family were on it, then I'd be like, no, 820 would apply. But
so then
I think the issue really comes down to is, you and I disagree on the issue of the use. I know Bob's saying that the structure's there, okay, and it's a drainage. So
yes,
we're able to put a drainage pipe from the street, even though I would suggest to this board, it's a nonconformity because it violates 520.4 number 4, because it's an immediate discharge straight into our water supply.
I agree with you completely. That is
creates the nonconformity.
That's
of
a
a
non-conforming structure other than a single or two-family dwelling. If you were looking to change or expand or amend that non-conforming structure, we would be in a position to review this application as an 810.3 special permit. And I think to your earlier argument, we would need to be consistent in that review as we have been with our 810.2 home special permits within the Water Resource Protection District. The issue I have here is you're asking us to allow the construction of a new home in the face of 520.4, where no home existed on this lot prior to the imposition of the bylaw. I can't tell myself that that isn't a new nonconformity that requires a variance. Now, here's the kicker. I think you might meet the variance statute if you, in your application, the variance standard, I should say, if you in your application could tell us and show us that that new home, I think you get the unique characteristics, right? The tributary and the pipe are unique in my mind, but other people can argue about that. And I think that you might be able to, if you had someone that was well-versed, and that person might be Greg, I'm not familiar enough with his CV, to say that the construction of this home could happen with certain countermeasures in a manner that would not defeat the purpose of the bylaw.
Well, let me ask this, Mr. Chair. Could I ask the indulgence of this board to continue the hearing? Okay. And I ask that because I know Greg does have the expertise of, talking about rain gardens, being able to talk about the stormwater treatment, to be able to show. And what I'd like to do is have an opportunity to speak with the client, to go back and, if need be, think about amending our application. But that's only if the board were to grant our request for a continuance. And if I may I'd like to ask that at this time.
So I would be inclined to grant a continuance. I think before we get to that, I would like to hear one more time. George, I see you nodding your head, and I think you and I have been going to sort of the same place here. But please tell me if
one question, because I was getting to the same place you were, Tony, on this, because I was staring at the variance standard. In 2015, when there was an application for a variance, was it denied? Or did
No, it was withdrawn, George.
It was
What
withdrawn.
happened was
Okay.
two of the board members that were going to approve it. The chair at the time, it was not Anthony, was against it.
Okay.
And,
All right,
so
but it was withdrawn.
It was withdrawn.
Okay, so that was the piece that I wanted to have.
and a variance for, I know the applicant knows, and I know George knows, the variance would have required the approval of all three members of the board at the time.
It would have failed. But it was not, it was not denied, and it was not taken up on appeal.
Correct.
So, okay, understood. Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the standard, everything that Tony said. If you look at the variance standard, structures owing to circumstances relating to the soil conditions or structures, but not affecting the zoning district in which it's located. I mean, it looks like what you guys are going to build is going to be otherwise compliant with the zoning bylaws, but for this other issue. So, with enough stuff, I think it's a reasonable application. Can't say we're going to approve it, but I can say that.
Understood.
I think it's a path forward. So I'm
Understood.
Yeah. And then Susan, I don't want to put words in the applicant's mouth, but I think they might be interested into whether or not you thought George and I were crazy.
Right.
I don't think you're crazy. That was my question. Why wasn't this a variance? Because I was interested in the other application. And then prior to voting on anything, I was wondering if we could hear public comments.
Yeah, I think
but that would be.
I'm interested. There seem to be quite a few people here. I'm interested in other thoughts.
Yeah, and I think that we absolutely need to do that.
But should we do that now, or should we do that when and if?
No, I think that
I think
we
you
need
do it
to,
both.
I'm going to try to, I will certainly try to keep us on task, especially given where we might be going. But I think in all fairness, we do need to hear from the public.
Sure.
And Bob, before we do that, anything to add, especially given where this conversation is going?
No, not really. I mean, I'm certainly aware that the board is authorized and given special permits for several and even very recent additions and improvements, within this same zone that we're speaking about. So I've been following the argument, certainly.
Yeah.
So nothing further to add, really.
Okay. With that, and then I think we will answer questions as they come up. So with that, we are going to ask whoever is wishing to make some comments, or if you have questions on this application, if you could please raise your hand. I'm going to call on you or ask you to unmute one at a time, and just your name and your address for the record. And I would ask folks to please, I would like you to get to all of your points. I would like you to have the chance to be heard. We do have a lot of folks here that I suspect may want to speak on this application. So please do keep that in mind so everyone gets an opportunity. So please go ahead and raise your hand. And I would encourage you to use the Zoom function just because it's a little easier to keep track, but we'll look out for video hand raising as well. Let's see what we got. I'm noticing less hand raising than I expected.
I think most of these people are here for the next one.
All right. That is, I'm surprised that they all are. I'm going to give you one more second just in case. But you have one. Mr. Fenton.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you,
No.
Mr. Chairman. Mark Fenton, 25 Crescent Ave. I'll just say very, very quickly, I think, at least on the face of it, 520.4 really is the critical factor. It's the defining rule that you have to consider, and it's very clear. I mean, in a case like this, it's pretty clear about what its intent is, as well as what the specifications are regarding the buffer. And I'd remind the board, that you really, I think that has to really be the driving, unless you have some compelling reason to think otherwise, that's got to be the determinant factor as you decide on this application. Because it's very clear that it says, no permanent structure to be constructed within that 150-foot buffer. And this clearly is looking to do that. And the tributary has already been determined to be, in fact, a tributary to Tech Factory, or to the water system. So I think those two pieces are clear. And so I'd ask the board to place them foremost in your minds. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else raising their hand? I actually don't see anyone. Just to Mr. Fenton's point, and Attorney Denny, I think you sort of got the gist of what we were saying. I think that the intent of that bylaw, and not substantially derogating from it, to use the term of the standard, will be the crux of the review of a variance application, if the relief can be granted without defeating the purpose of the bylaw, which I think we all agree is a very valid purpose.
I agree. I'll take a look. If I'm fascinated, because I do have some material about when the bylaw was promulgated. And obviously there's usually a planning board report that comes forth, but also see if there's an advisory. I'd be fascinated to see, when this was countenanced back in '87, there's obviously discussions about what they're trying to prevent, which is pretty evident with some of these toxic, hazardous type of uses and structures and stuff. Well, not structures, but uses. But also what kind of discussion was raised about what it was not going to try to prevent. They might have said, no, we don't want new homes. We don't want structures. I mean, if I find it, I'll produce it. I mean, that's the issue. So it's an interesting issue.
Certainly. I think we might add one more person that was trying to speak up. Was that the case?
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Just your name and address for the record, please.
Okay, my name's John Scarra. I live at 330 Rear Country Way, diagonally across from the property.
Yes.
And a lot has been said tonight, but I'd like to go, I've got lost in a lot of it, but I'd like to go back to a couple of things that I think where this all starts is that it was stated earlier that this lot had a corrugated pipe that ran diagonally across. It went from someplace in the lot on Countryway or Williamsburg Lane to where the head wall is now. And it was a corrugated pipe, and you couldn't build on it back then because, again, it ran diagonally across the lot. Now it was sold to the town for $1, put an easement to on the Countryway portion running parallel with Williamsburg Lane, so the town could put the easement and put the head wall in place. So the way I'm looking at it is the town relieved and made this, I guess, in view of anything else is simpler, is that they'd made this is being viewed that the town made this a buildable lot by relieving something that wasn't formally in place and acceptable by having the diagonal pipe originally. The other thing that I don't understand on this is that it was stated earlier that there was 52 inches of fill that were altered or disturbed put on this property. Most of this property is 6 to 8 feet below grade from whether you decide you're using Countryway or Williamsburg Lane. Most of this property along the drainage pipe is 6 to 8 feet below the surface of the road, and how that would impact any building on that lot. And the fill that's in there was put on there by numerous contractors in the town and the town itself. So I look at this, that there was a convenience between the prior owner who's passed away and passed this piece of property on and the town, and that this runs hand in glove, that they exchanged the corrugated pipe for an easement for the price of $1 to put the drainage pipe on. And at no time would it have ever been built on if that diagonal pipe was still in there. So I think that needs all to be taken into consideration. But one of the bigger things is number 11 Williamsburg Lane. I haven't heard anybody say anything about that. In the contour of this land currently, if you fill in that 6 to 8 foot depth on this property, what happens to the runoff and what happens to that person's property? This is all back going down towards where the head wall is, and the house that's currently there sits below this property, not even with this property or above this property. That's going to create even a bigger problem. And one closing thing is, in the conversation tonight, that was brought up was White Ash Lane. I don't know if this adds anything to it, but in the further conversation was White Ash Lane is one house, and there was a pre-existing structure there when when the permit was issued. I don't know if it wasn't involved in the whole conversation, but at one point there was a proposal to put in more than one house there, and I don't know if that's why it ended up only being one single family house, but that was being marketed on the real estate market of a possible subdivision when the pre-existing house was there, and ended up being one. So there's a lot of questions left, but I still don't know how you can end up building on this piece of property. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to confirm, do we have anyone else on the Williamsburg Lane application with question or comment? I don't think we do. So typically, when we start to talk about continuances, we look at our next meeting, and February is always a bit of fun. So Janine, I will not be available for the meeting on February 17th.
Okay.
Could I
Yes,
interject?
please.
Sure. Two things. One is I certainly would propose a site walk if the board members wanted to take a look at the property, to take a look at it, number one. The second thing I was going to ask if possible to meet in March, not because you're missing, it's just my schedule is such that I have something else in February, and I was hoping that's the case. But I will defer to your board, whatever's going to be convenient. If February's it, then we'll be prepared. If not, I would suggest March, if that's possible.
Sure. So March would obviously work for me. I'm not available for the meeting in February, and anything that, and any amount of time that allows the applicant to provide more material from those qualified to state how the development of this home could be achieved without endangering the water source, which is what I think will be the crux of what I think will be a variance application. I would be all for. I think we need as much information as possible in that regard.
Then I would ask for March. I mean, Mr. Chairman, you know lawyers, they love to produce paperwork. I don't want to do that. I'd rather get the substance so that the board members and you folks have in front of you. And so if that's possible, March would be a preferred date.
Sure. And then in terms of the site walk, I would encourage any members of the board to do that. To be honest, for me, seeing wetland, seeing dry land, I would rather have the applicant spend those resources and that time on having a clearer report from those qualified to speak on behalf of the dangers and or mitigation of dangers to the water source. And then and in that regard, and March may be better, Janine, I think we'll discuss the best way to get this in front of, I think at least the DEP and the Water Commission, to get their input on it, because I think it would be appropriate for this board to hear from them.
Okay.
And Attorney Dennehy, obviously we would share whatever we received on that front with you as soon as we received it.
Thank you.
With that, I think it's clear. Mr. Nguyen, why don't you go ahead? Let me see if I can unmute you. Ask to I think you're unmuted. There we go. Please go ahead.
Great. Yeah, Jerry Nguyen. I'm at 30 Williamsburg. I just was curious. A lot of stuff tonight was way over my pay grade. All these numbers and codes and whatnot. But if there was a sidewalk, is that something I could go on? Be there for?
I honestly don't know the procedure for non-board members performing sidewalks.
I'm mostly just curious. There's a lot of, I don't know. I just was kind of, if I could be there, it'd be great. If not, it's not a big deal.
Sure, I mean that sincerely. I honestly don't know the procedure for non-board members or town employees participating in sidewalks.
Okay, I was just curious.
Please.
So if I might, Mr. Nguyen, typically I don't, because of liability. If somebody trips and falls, they get injured. But, given, whoops, you disappeared on me. There you are. Given that you're in a butter, be happy to reach out to you, sir, and meet with me and my client if you want. So you can walk around, take a look at it. You're in a butter, and like you to take a look at the project that I always think is important for neighbors. So if you'd like to, absolutely. Well, I'll be happy to meet with you and at least go on it. The fear is that people going on it, getting injured, But
I understand.
Be happy to take you to it if you'd like.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Attorney Dennehy, I think I'm correct that I hear that the applicant is requesting a continuance until our March 17th meeting.
St. Patrick's Day. Sure. Sounds like a good date.
All right. And obviously it sounds like that continuance may, over the course of that, it may include a revision of this application to a variance with appropriate time for us to publicize that.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
I guess to a certain extent, is that a withdrawal?
I think I'll do is a motion to amend or
Yeah,
a amendment to it and redefine it and get that over.
All right, I think I'd make a motion for the board to approve the applicant's request for continuance to our March meeting, currently scheduled for March 17th. And with the understanding the applicant may amend or modify their application to include a variance.
I'll second it.
And all those in favor, Bucieri, aye.
Seeksis, aye.
Chris Karsha, aye.
Susan Harrison, aye.
Justin Marks, aye.
All right, the ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, board members. We'll see you in March. Be
Thanks. Great
safe.
discussion.
Thank you. There we go. All right, we're going to move on to our fifth application, continued from December 16th, brought by Scott and Tara McGavin of 39 Arrowwood Drive in Scituate, requesting a variance in accordance with MGL 48 Section 10 and Section 520.5F of the Scituate zoning bylaw, and any other relief that the Board of Appeals may grant to allow for the construction of an in-ground pool and retaining wall at 39 Arrowwood Drive in Scituate. The single-family dwelling is located on a conforming lot and meets all property line setbacks.
Anthony, I received a request for a continuance on this from Tara and Scott McGavin. I believe I forwarded that to you via email.
Oh, I apologize. I bet you did.
That's okay. I just,
They are looking for that continuance into February, yes?
yes, due to approval from the Conservation Commission, the meeting that was originally scheduled got continued.
Sure.
So that bumped them out a little bit.
Okay. So we will, I guess, first, and so I'm actually away in February in advance of Scituate vacation weeks. Are we going to have a quorum on the 17th of February? We'll just make sure of that first.
Okay.
I will be there.
George, Susan.
I should be there. I'm gone the
So
following.
I've got to check.
I know
Okay.
I'm gone the following week, but I should
Yep.
be.
I'm fairly certain I'll be present as well. I'll just get.
All right. That sounds good. Janine, I think we'll keep it for the 17th.
Mhm.
And then it sounds like I need to make a motion that we continue the McGavin application for 39 Arrowwood to our February 17th. No, I'm sorry, our February 20th
Yeah.
meeting. I'm screwing this all up.
17th, I believe.
Our February 17th
Oh,
meeting.
I won't be here
Yes.
the 20th.
That's right, on our February 17th meeting.
Okay.
Can we hear? Were we all here in December? For the December meeting, all five of us?
I was not.
I was.
Okay, so we'll have three.
So you'll have three, and Justin, we can make arrangements typically, especially with one of us down. You would go back through YouTube and just watch that hearing. So that then you could state that you had familiarized yourself. And it's a somewhat short hearing because the crux of that portion of the hearing was it didn't make sense for us to hear the variance because the crux of it was going to be essentially very similar to what we were just talking about, the application. We needed to understand the environmental impacts behind the grading variance that they were looking for. And therefore the Concom should go first and give us some feedback on that.
Right. If it wasn't for the grading variance, it wouldn't have been an issue, right? But
That's right.
That was the underlying issue. It's not whether they could put in a pool. That was the particular situation.
All right, so we'll have Chris, Susan, and George, and Justin will familiarize himself with the application. And I've made a motion to continue the 39 Arrowwood application to our February meeting. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, Bucieri, aye.
Karsha, aye.
Seeksis, aye.
Harrison, aye.
Marks, aye.
There we go. All right, our sixth application brought by Andrew Spath of Stockbridge Properties LLC and of 49 Kavanaugh Road in Scituate, requesting a variance in accordance with MGL 48, Section 10 and Section 520.5F of the Scituate zoning bylaw, and any other relief that the Board of Appeals may grant to allow the construction of a berm at 106 through 108 Stockbridge Road in Scituate.
Mr. Chairman, I
Yes,
have to recuse myself from this. I'm gonna butter.
absolutely. Thank you. And Mr. Spath, welcome.
Hello, how are you?
Not bad. So let us know if you want to go first, you want Bob to go first, but
I would think that Bob should probably go first and bring everyone up to speed.
Bob, do you mind recounting why we're back for a variance application?
No, not at all. I don't have the bylaw in front of me, but
I can take care of that part.
okay. Within the bylaw, there's a stipulation in the Water Resource Protection District, Zone A or Zone 2, at any rate, a zone that this berm will fall into. That the slopes are critical to protection of the district's resources, and that no slope can be created over, I believe, 25% or 1 in 4. The way the berm was discussed originally and the way it really needs to be constructed in a practical manner would lead to the side slopes being more like 1 to 1. That would give you a 10-foot high berm with a base dimension of 25 feet, assuming you have a 5-foot flat area on top for plantings. If you go by what the regulations say, and if the variance is not in place, that berm becomes about 80 feet wide at the base, which is clearly impractical and not what was intended by the discussion and the board's decision. So that's basically it.
And Bob, in your opinion and view, the purpose of this section of the bylaw limiting the grading to 25% was to protect what exactly?
I would say it would be to protect erosion, runoff, siltation, those sorts of things.
And in your opinion, do the other conditions that we had already put on the berm in our other relief that we have granted, are they adequate, especially given the location and purpose of this berm, to protect against improper runoff and damaging of other vegetation, given this slope?
I think if you, the berm needs to be clearly built correctly with the right materials. It needs to be planted with the right mix. Jute mesh is often used on very steep slopes to stabilize the slopes until the plantings can grow up through that mesh and stabilize with their root systems. There's a very good example behind the building. It's being constructed on 3A Herringbrook Meadow, which slopes down into the marshland there. That's probably just about 1 to 1. Was provided with jute mesh under the supervision of a very qualified landscape architecture firm. So they knew what they were doing and knew what they were asking for. So I'd say something very similar to that would work here and should be done here.
So it sounds like a combination of jute mesh and plantings so as to maintain the integrity of the slope of the berm.
Right, the jute mesh will eventually dissolve over a period of a few years, and by that time the plantings are considered to have taken hold in the root systems, actually do the stabilization.
Okay. And so regarding variance, I just want to look at the standard quickly. Owing to circumstances relating to soil conditions, shape, or topography of such land or structures, and especially affecting such land, but not generally affected the zoning district. So we have a unique piece of property of a unique shape that abuts and sort of hugs some residential areas of unique use that is allowed in this district because of its grandfathering, and it only affects this property in this district. A literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance or bylaw would involve substantial hardship, financial or otherwise, to the petitioner or appellant, and I would argue, and to the abutters. We're seeking this variance because of a benefit that it serves to the property owner and to the abutters. And that desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent or purpose of the ordinance or bylaw. And based on our discussions just now, it sounds to me like the berm can be constructed in a manner that will not derogate from the intention of the bylaw in limiting the slope. And it sounds like it's something that has been achieved quite recently elsewhere in town.
Correct.
For those reasons, and especially given the unique scenario that this property finds itself in, I think we have a valid variance application here. But I would love to hear from the other members of the board.
I agree. I mean, we've been trying to provide this benefit to the abutters. And I think it's, of all things, it will be a substantial improvement to sort of the site and what's going on in the area. So I think it's a great idea. And I think it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I agree as well.
Chris and Justin, anything else to add?
No, it makes sense to me.
Makes sense to me.
All right, and Bob, just before we get to the public, quickly, with our last iteration of this application, we did have a plan and a drawing of the berm, and I think you mentioned earlier, we're looking at a berm base of about 25 feet, if I'm remembering correctly from our initial conditions, to be constructed entirely on the subject applicant's property, not on abutting property, even to the extent that some of that property may be owned by the applicant. And now we are adding the understanding that a combination of jute mesh and plantings will be used in a manner that is considered sufficient in the eyes of the building department. Does that make sense to you?
That sounds good.
With that, I would ask that any members of the public that have any questions or comments on the Stockbridge Properties application, please raise your hand either on video or using the Zoom function. Interesting. I don't see anyone raising their hands.
I have a question.
Yes.
Chris Carson, 119 Stockbridge Road. Is there a maintenance requirement written into this, whether he's obligated to maintain this berm in perpetuity or as long as he owns the property or however?
So I think that's a very good question. I think that was part of our initial special permit, in that in exchange for giving this special permit,
it would be to build and maintain the berm.
Yeah.
Right. We had a condition
That's right.
in there, I recall.
And I think this variance should certainly be conditioned on the maintenance of that berm, not just being the maintenance of the existence of the berm, but the maintenance of the structure of the berm with some combination of those plantings and mesh or other materials that maintain its integrity and prevent a certain measure of runoff. Anyone else? Do not.
Fenton,
Yes, please. Mr. Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark Fenton, 25 Crescent. My recollection was that in your last meeting, or at least a meeting discussing this application, there's also somebody either from Waterways or Conservation that did ask about the implications of this berm and its proximity to some water. Was the applicant directed, and this is through you, Mr. Chairman, was the applicant directed to go before Concom, or did that not end up being a requirement for the continuation of the work and the grant of the permit? Could you just clarify that? Because I remember the discussion, but not with your condition.
I do not believe they were sent to Concom, but Janine, I think Concom is notified of the variance application. Is that correct?
correct.
Mr. Chairman, to clarify, then that means that they have the opportunity to weigh in if it's of concern, but they would not reach out to you otherwise, right? So they get an opportunity to red flag it, but not necessarily.
That is correct. We do not typically receive an affirmative, we don't have anything to say notice from other boards that are notified of our application.
Understood. Great. I just I thought I'd just clarify that just for the abutters and for, to make sure we understood that. I appreciate that.
No, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I did actually bring the plan to the conservation agent, and she did not have any problem with the berm itself or the construction of the berm.
That is good to know. Thank you. Yes, David, please.
Yeah, I guess this would be more of a question, I guess, for Andrew, which is, assuming that the variance gets passed today, do we have a sense of timing of, I guess, when you would think the berm would be built? Understanding that you've been going through the process, I didn't know how it's been playing out.
Well, we're gonna have to wait till spring to do the plantings. The construction will probably begin 30-something days from now, would be my gut, but I have no idea what the winter's gonna bring.
Yeah, understood. I just didn't know if you had a sense of overall timing, given that it's obviously shifted, given the different approvals you got to seek.
Hopefully this is the last one. All right. Yeah. All right. I think that is it for public comment. With that, I will make a motion that the board grant the requested variance requested by Stockbridge Properties regarding the property at 106 through 108 Stockbridge Road, and granting a variance from the slope requirements found within section 520.5F to allow a berm of 10 feet in height and approximately 25 feet in width to come close to a 1-to-1 slope grading, with the condition that jute mesh and plantings, a combination of the two as the plantings mature, be utilized to maintain the integrity of the berm and prevent against unwanted runoff. And also with the understandings that all requirements and conditions of the prior relief granted by this board with respect to this property also be achieved. Do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Seeks aye.
Harrison, aye.
Oh, Bucieri, aye, sorry. I think We got
Chris
Mark's there.
Karsha recused.
Thank you, Chris. All right, the ayes have it. Thank you very much, Mr. Spath, and I will take a run at drafting that variance, because we don't do that very often.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bob, if you could, or Janine, because you probably have it, if you could do me the favor of sending me, I think I have to find it. I'm not sure that I still have it. I think we have a diagram of what that berm was to look like.
Yep.
And Bob,
Yeah,
if you wouldn't
we've got
mind,
that.
a very short paragraph of some proposed wording of the jute mesh and plantings condition, because your words are going to be better than mine in that regard.
Sure, happy to. No
Yeah, if
problem.
you shoot that to me via email, I will get a short variance drafted to
Okay.
send around.
Great. Probably won't be before Monday.
That's no problem at all. All right. We have an approval of meeting minutes on the agenda.
Yes, December.
Make a motion to approve the December meeting minutes in the form circulated by Janine.
I second.
Okay. Approve.
I approved.
I was not present, so I don't know that you necessarily need
Yeah.
my approval.
No problem, and you carry approved. I think
Thank
we
you.
are good to go. Thank you very much, Janine.
Thank you, Janine.
With that, a motion to adjourn.
Quick question.
Yes.
You were talking about the variance standards and whatnot. Where do we find those?
That is MGL 40. I'll tell you.
MGL Chapter 40A, Section 10. Google it. It's available.
It's right in the,
It might be in the book.
it's right in the application, right up on numbers, the 6th application.
All right. Thank you.
If you Google Massachusetts MGL
Yep.
40A, Section 10, the statute will come up. A lot of law firm articles will come up about it. And also, if you Google Massachusetts variance standard.
Very good. Thank you.
No problem at all. We don't typically see 3 of them or 2.5 of them in a night.
Sounds good.
All right.
So who's going to be here? So we're on for February 17th. Is that?
That's right.
That's
Everyone
happening.
except for me.
All right. So the four of us will take it, and we'll last man standing will chair.
You can be chair.
Yeah, I vote for you.
I vote for you.
Yeah. No, thank
Good
you.
luck, barring a.
Yeah, but
I
Bob
have
better
not-
be there. That's all.
Yeah.
I will.
Otherwise, we're just walking out.
No
I will
problem.
miss you guys.
All right.
But enjoy the school vacation week.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you all very much. Good night.
Have a
Night.
good night.
Good night.
Hey,